job. Thanks, Courtney. All right. Our trivia question: was everybody alive in 1960? So, even if you weren't alive, because I wasn't either. There was a famous dance that started in 1960. Raise your hand if you know it. Jim. You are correct, sir. The twist. So the person that got answered has got to display the twist.
Chubby checker.
Chubby checker. All right, you're out of control. Donna.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. And he's not going to do the twist, he's already said.
I do that every time I stand up.
Oh, okay. Okay. The husband had finished reading a new book.
Hold on, Donna. Hold on. Y'all can't hear her if if you're talking. Thank you.
Ready? The husband had just finished reading a new book entitled "You Can Be the Man of the House." He storms into the kitchen, walks directly up to his wife, points the finger in her face. He said sternly, "From now on, you need to know that I am the man of the house, and my word is law. You will prepare me a gourmet meal tonight, and when I'm finished eating my meal, you will serve me a scrumptious dessert. After that, you are going to draw me my bath so I can relax. You will wash my back, towel me dry, and bring me my robe. Then you will massage my feet and my hands. Then after that's done, guess who's going to dress me and comb my hair?" His wife replied, "The funeral director will be my best bet."
That's a good one.
When she was a widow, she had nothing. She had no food, and every day she would get down on her knees and she would pray to God, fill my pantry with food." And one day there was a knock at the door. When she opened up the door, right down the doorstep was all the food she had been looking for. She said, "Oh my goodness, God did it, God did it, God did it." Right while she was praising God, a man jumps out from behind the bushes and he says, "I'm your next door neighbor and I'm an atheist. And I heard you praying yesterday to a God, praying yesterday for a God to fill your pantry. So I went to the grocery store, I bought all the groceries. I put them right at your doorstep and hid in the bushes, all the while you were praising the God that does not exist." She said, "God did it, God did it, God did it." "You are not listening. You are praising the wrong guy. I heard you praying the prayer from the window. I don't believe in God. There is no God. I went to the grocery store. I bought the groceries with my own money, with my own credit card, put them in my car, came over here, and put them out on the doorstep next to the door. I watch you give praise to a God that does not exist." This woman, she doesn't know much, but she said, "God did it, God did it, God did it." And he made the devil pay for it. And there's a little dance that goes with that, but I ain't doing none of that. If he's not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. Okay, what I've learned in life is that for every inch of sadness lies a foot of happiness ahead. I've learned that the simplest of times brings the grandest of pleasures, and the hardest goodbyes often lead to the best hellos. I've learned that crazy chances guides us to unexpected discoveries and that tough times unveil the sincerity of people. I've learned that you have to hold on to your smile every day and free yourself of things that make you frown.
All right.
Thank you.
Before we get started, Carol has a visitor with her today. Would you introduce her to the crowd, Carol?
This is my friend Sandy Clark. We've only known each other about 45 years. Our daughters were in kindergarten together.
Oh.
She's a dear, dear friend. We were doubles partners together in team tennis for women. Won a few matches along the way, and I see Jesus in her.
Oh. Did you go to Wimbledon together?
No.
Because I know Carol went to Wimbledon.
Yeah, I did go without her.
Okay. Well, welcome, Shirley. welcome, Sandy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Shirley, you're welcome.
Good morning. Feels like it's been forever. It's been 3 weeks. 3 weeks since I've been up here. That's wild. Absolutely wild.
But Russell, before we get started, I wasn't in church on Sunday this night at 6, so I watched your sermon. It was very good. You
Very
did a
good.
very good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I actually could keep up and take notes.
What's that? I'm sorry?
I could actually keep up and take notes.
Really?
Yeah.
Was I that slow? I used to. There was someone when I was preaching who they wanted to follow along, so I did like little blank spaces, and they kind of would fill them in. But after a while, they just said, "Just give me your notes," and I would print out the exact same thing I had. But I don't have a lot of notes. It's scripture, and then a few little blurbs, and that's it. So they got to see everything that I had. It was just like a couple pages, you know.
We used to do that when Jimmy preached. He used to have a handout that had
Yeah.
fill in the blank.
I remember that. Oh yeah, that was years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, I started coming here in '05 with my mom, and I came off and on for about 5 years. Yeah. So, oh yeah, I remember the little blanks. Yeah.
Hey, Russell. Someone sitting in front of me had their cell phone laying on top of the pew, and it was actually transposing everything you said.
Was it really?
Yep.
Oh, I'm afraid of
I
that.
don't know who the person was, but it was a lady that I was unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
But she had it sitting right up on top of the pew.
I was
And
copying everything I
I could
said.
see it, and it was just scrolling as it was going. It was,
Well, it's in. I've never actually had one of my sermons recorded before. I've only had one done like audio, never video. So I never get to see how I move and things. But I told Tyler, I said, I don't do this. You know, I don't like this. I usually have my stuff on the side. So I get to do a little dance and do a little twist. You know. Yeah, well, good morning. It's good that all of you are here this morning. So yeah, it's been a while. And what's interesting is something we're going to go into here is going to touch back a little bit at the end of chapter 19, but you don't have to have referred to it. I'm going to kind of touch base on it. But here I just wanted to specifically cover the one parable he's going to do, the laborers in the vineyard here. We're going to go into a little bit of depth of it, but it's not, it's kind of, it has a few different interpretations, all right, but we're not going to go too deep into those. I'll touch on them a little bit, but I'll hit the one that I think is the one that's really, really important to get from here. So, can I get someone, is it okay if I get someone to read from 1 down through 16?
Is that 20?
You're good.
Yeah, chapter 20.
1 through 16?
Yes.
For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire men to work in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into the vineyard. About a third hour he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, you also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right. So they went. He went out again about the 6th hour and the 9th hour and did the same thing. And about the 11th hour he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing? Because no one's hired us, they answered. And he said to them, you also go and work in the vineyard. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the foreman, call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going to the first. The workers who were hired about the 11th hour came and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. And when they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. These men who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, friend, I am not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the man who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? That's 16.
No, 16, keep going.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh. So the last will be first, and the first will be last.
Perfect. So what's interesting is this is almost a response to what Peter had said in the previous chapter, where Peter says, this is after the rich man has come to him, or the rich young ruler has come to him and said, hey, what good thing can I do? And Jesus says, are you doing these things? And the guy says, yes, I am. And then Jesus says, I have one more thing to do. And the guy's like, oh, I can't do that. And he walks away sad. Peter's response, of course, is similar to the response that Jesus gives about giving things up. And Peter says, oh, look at all the stuff that we've given up for you. You know, you're saying that it's so hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. What about us? We've given up all this stuff. And Jesus says, it's true, you've given these things up, and you're gonna receive your reward. And he says at the end of that, he says, you're gonna get all these things, and you're also gonna get eternal life. But then he says, many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. And then he goes on to give this parable. Now what I find here, the contrast, I love between God's expectations and delivery versus human expectation. Humans' expectations oftentimes are about, there's a word that we use now in our culture, begins with an F, not fair. Everything has to be fair. And what is fair? Being fair is completely 100% subjective. Fairness is never objective. If I have a lot of money and I expect to receive a car, I don't want to get a little Honda Fit. Okay, my little Honda Fit. I don't want to have that. I want to have a Mercedes or Rolls Royce. I think I mentioned those on Sunday. But I want to have a nice car because that's what's fair, right? I have a lot of money, so wouldn't it be fair to get me a nice car? Well, someone who doesn't have a lot of money or maybe not even have a vehicle, it would be fair to them, like everybody else has a car, they just want that Honda Fit. That's all that they would say would be fair. But then if everybody else gets a Mercedes based on their income, they say, wait a minute, if they can buy those, why can't I get one? And it becomes about human perception, human subjectivity. But God, of course, being over all of it, kind of turns that on its head, and I really love that. So he says the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went up early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. So plainly, what is the kingdom of heaven here that we're talking about? The church. We're talking about the church. We're talking about the context of the church. We're talking about the context of the church here, the context of the church in the hereafter. And who's the landowner? God. He's the landowner. He owns all of it. Now, here's what's interesting. When you talk about going out early in the morning, it doesn't necessarily always have a translation or has to be something. This is the time that God goes out to spread his message and to get workers that are going to work in the work field. Okay? The vineyard, of course, being the world, all right? And the church being the laborers. Now, when he goes and agrees to give a denarius to the guys who are going to work all day, does anyone know how much that was back then?
It's a day's wage.
It's a day's wage. I've read different things, interestingly enough, different takes on it, where the denarius could be a day's wage for a laborer, or it could have been a day's wage for a Roman soldier. And if it was a day's wage for a Roman soldier, then to give it to a laborer would have been very generous. because the Roman soldiers would have received a lot more pay than would a simple Jewish laborer, okay? So for them to receive it, if it's that amount, then it would be a big deal. Where if it's just a daily wage, they go, okay, that's exactly what we expect to get. We expect to get a daily wage. What's interesting, though, is he gets them and they agree to it. Then he goes out, and what I think is funny is when he hires the ones at the 3rd hour and the ones at the 6th hour, and he says, you go into the vineyard and whatever is right, I will give you. It doesn't say that he mentions a specific amount. He just says, I'm going to give you your wage. And they agree to it and they say, sure. And again, when he goes out in the 6th and the 9th hour, he does the same thing. But what I really love here is the 11th hour. Now, when it comes to times, does anyone really, can anyone tell me kind of what the different times mean? Why do some get hired in the morning and then some are hired later? What does that mean?
Age,
Age?
when they're saved.
Would people
Like
become
as a
believers?
child,
Okay, so some become early on,
versus
some
somebody
later
on
on.
their deathbed.
Right? Some on their deathbed. What else could this refer to? There's a parable that came to mind, another parable, when I was going through this, and that was the one of the prodigal son, where you had the sons that are in the house, and then the youngest one says, you know what, forget this, I just give me my money and I'm going to go. And so the father says, okay, this is what everything's worth, here's your section of wealth, and he gives it to him. And he goes off and just wills away his inheritance. It's gone, okay? He spends it, he blows it, he's sleeping with the pigs, it's awful. He comes back to his father rejoices, slaughters the calf, brings him into the household, gives him the robe, gives him the ring, gives him all these things. He's so happy and elated that he's back. And who comes up and grumbles?
guy
The older son, the one who did what?
Just stayed there and worked.
He stayed there. He did what was right. He stayed in the house and he worked. And yet the one who goes and squanders everything gets to have all these blessings. When I think about this, yes, you can a lot of times we think about age when people come to the faith. But who does Jesus relate this to when he talks about people receiving the message? Who does Jesus go to get the message of the kingdom of heaven?
The lawbreakers and the bad people.
Right.
Yeah.
Jesus doesn't go to the people who,
That's
since their
totally
youth, which is very interesting because that contrasts what the rich young ruler says. He says, all these things I practiced since I was a boy, since I was in my youth. Well, here we have a contrast, because just because you've been doing it since your youth doesn't mean you're going to get so much more than someone else who doesn't. In fact, I love when he says there, when he comes, he gathers them all together, and those who were hired last get the payment first. I find that interesting, because what would happen if he gave the first ones their payment?
They'd be gone.
They'd be gone, they'd never see it. Why do you think in this illustration he does that? Why does he flip it on its head?
Was he trying to teach him a lesson?
Teach them a lesson. It's simple as that. Jesus wants them to understand that it's not so much about how much you're getting, it's about what you're getting. Some people have contrasted this with the church being the later laborers and the Jews who came to faith, like the apostles and those early on in the church, being the ones who received it early. But even Jesus says, blessed are those who have not seen and yet still believe. So I love the contrast there, because even though all of them have agreed to get this wage, every single one of them agrees to what they're going to get. The ones at the 11th hour get this big, generous, they go and work for an hour. I can only imagine they get hired at the 11th hour. The 12th hour is when the sun's going down because it's evening. So those guys have to walk to the vineyard, get ready, get their stuff, and then they go probably for half an hour. Then they're finished, they're done, they come up, and they get a day's wage. You know, man, I stood in the courtyard all day and I'm getting paid for a day. You know, it's pretty good. But I think it doesn't necessarily always relate to age. I think it has to do with how deep someone is in their depravity. Whereas you have individuals who have been sunk in their depravity for a very long time. You have people who have been through the muck and the mire. Even if they're out of that muck and mire by the age of 20, there are some who've kind of led what we would call a good life, all the way up into their 30s, and then all of a sudden they become a believer. Well, they came later than this person. Shouldn't they get more? It has nothing to do, I think, with that. Again, I think it has to do with how low someone was, how far away from God they were, as opposed to just being age there. But again, when it comes to the faith, who makes the ultimate decision of how much we're going to get? God does. We don't get to say that. In fact, we think about all the crowns and the wonderful mansions and things, and I've heard lots of different interpretations of that, where yes, you will be judged for what you do. Yes, Jesus says you are to produce fruit, but it never says how much. It just says produce fruit. It never says a specific number. Your tree doesn't have to be blossomed. What if your abilities only produce so much fruit? You are still producing fruit. But yet, in each illustration, both the prodigal son and here, the ones who are producing the most, the ones who are giving the most, see this, and as an example, Christ puts them last in line, and they're the first ones to say, wait a minute, how come we're not getting more than these individuals? So when it comes to that, I think sometimes in the church, we have that same kind of passion and emotion when it comes to it. I've been serving Jesus, since I was a boy, and I've been doing this thing, and I've loved my whole life, and this person's been nothing but a sinner, and they come into grace, and all of a sudden, they get the same reward as I had. That doesn't seem fair. But again, that's totally subjective. We like to put our thoughts into God's mind and think, what is that fairness? Because it's not what we want, it's what He wants. And we get so wrapped up, I think, in the things that we want that we ultimately forget whose vineyard is it? It's not ours. It's not our world. We don't get to make that call. And I see that sometimes, that people, there's a jealousy there. I think of things that the church does, like in terms of events, and people who've been doing an event for years and years and years, and it doesn't get to be old hat. I don't want to say that. I didn't mean to rhyme that. But I think that sometimes it gets to be something that just becomes a part of the culture of the church. You're doing a thing. I could think of like the Halloween thing. Fall Festival. Thank you. The Fall Festival that we did for years and years and years, and kind of it's done like that. And then all of a sudden, say something else comes along, and we don't do that one anymore, and something else comes along. People get really excited about that one. And then people say, well, wait a minute, we were doing this. What about that? What about that thing? Again, that's subjectivity. We get so wrapped up in the idea that this is the thing that I was doing. Why isn't that more important than the new deal? Why is it something more flashy? I think about whenever I'm in there in the assembly, I look at the two screens, and when we came back from Ohio in 18, and we started coming here, that was new to me. Because back in the day, we were talking about Jimmy, we had the one screen that came down, we sang Days of Elijah and things, and I remember staring at that one screen that would go, and then it would go back up. You guys remember that? The one screen? Yeah, so, you didn't know, you remember that?
Yeah, I wasn't a member here then, but we came for a couple of things every now and then. I remember that.
The
I was
one
going like,
street.
whoa,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
That's
All
right.
the churches did.
Right, and it's funny for me because when we came here in 2005, I had never heard music like that. It had always been a piano or an organ. That's what I grew up with, and then even a cappella sometimes. But that's what I was used to. In fact, I was more used to the a cappella stuff on Sunday nights where it was just requests. I kind of missed that. Where Sunday nights we got together and we would just, sometimes the preacher would say, okay, we're just going to do music tonight. And we would sit there and sing songs out of the hymnal, and we'd also sing out of the Little Red Book. And there was a song in there, Give Me This Mountain, and I loved that song. And every time we'd go, I'd flip to that page. I couldn't tell you where it was in that little red spiral binder. And I'd pick that one, and I'd raise my hand, and Pastor Tan would say, Russell. And I'd say, give me this mountain. I love that song. or Victory in Jesus. That was a regular hymnal. But it's funny because when those things kind of end, we sometimes get into that idea that, well, what about this? What about the thing that we were doing? Why is it that so? I put so much importance in that. Why have we switched over to this? Now, for me, it was a little different. Because when I started hearing music, of course, I was a young person. I think I was in my early 20s, when we first came here. And it's funny because I said, oh, I can adapt to this because I like this kind of music. So it was something that was easy for me. However, and I'm not knocking them, well, I went to another church and they had a whole band thing and I wasn't used to that. And then, of course, coming back here, then the band was here again. But being at the other church, it's a little, what would the word be, flashier? You got like fog, and you've got the lights are a certain way, and even for me in there, and I know I play in the band, interestingly enough, but I find it to be sometimes a little production-y, a little, the lights cause an emotion, you do songs a certain way, and I just kind of miss cracking open the hymnal and just go, we're going to blast this song out today. We're going to hit this one. And in fact, nothing I think in my mind or heart will ever compare. I was homeless for several months, years. I mean, this is over 20 years ago. And during that time, I was at the Union Mission. And at the Union Mission, every single night, they had a time of devotion, prayer, and music. And I'll tell you, when the men would sing certain songs, what was that one? Precious is the Blood. And I can't remember the name of the song. But the way they sang that song was like everyone's heart melted together and went up to God. It was just like a Jesus praising moment. And every time we sing that song, nothing but the blood. There we go, nothing but the blood. Every time I sing that song anywhere else, I hearken back to that moment and I think, I miss that. I wish I could capture that again. But again, that's subjectivity. I would love to be able to sing hymns. I love hymns, but there's a lot of newer songs that I really, really love as well. But at the same time, I have to get rid of all that thought process and say, is this beneficial to Jesus? And if the answer is yes, then I have to say, it's worth it. Even if I don't like what it is, even if I don't like the pay that comes from it, even if I don't like what it's going at or the reason that it's being played, if it's something that benefits Jesus, it's totally worth it. Now I want to ask a question. When it comes to our lives, like I've kind of expressed some stuff for myself, when it comes to our lives, how can we be the early laborers? In what ways can we be the early laborers? Or maybe even from your own life. What are some examples where you've kind of grumbled against newer things or newer people? Give me some examples. It's okay to be honest.
Well, nobody's gonna say, for me personally, worship is an issue for me here, the singing and the music. It's not what I like, it's not, we've had much better. That's just my opinion, okay? Maybe some of y'all don't agree. But when you watch TV or when you watch the service at home, which I've only done it maybe 3 times, but you don't hear the whole band so much when you're listening to it at home. You hear more just the person that's leading that song, So you really hear just that person, And I don't enjoy it as much as I used to. And I'm grappling with that, right now.
I like that.
So.
I'm grappling with that. What do you think, there's a challenging question. What do you think should be the end goal for you in that?
Well, I think that I need to be, I guess more accepting of it, I suppose, but.
Do you have to be accepting of it? Do you have to like it?
No, you don't have to like it.
No, you don't have to like it.
I mean, fortunately for me, there's other parts of the that I like better.
Right.
But I have a real issue with, you know, the music part of it. Only because since I've been coming here, and I started coming here in the 90s, and I was away for a time and then I came back. And, you know, I had just reflect back on different, you know, worship leaders that we've had that I liked much better. I think that others had a real passion for it. And I think some of the people that do it don't have a passion for it. And I think that really shows in how, you know, they do different things, you know. Some of our leaders in our church have a passion for their job, you know, and some volunteers at our church have a real passion for being a volunteer, you know. I mean, it's,
Well, let me get specific to the music. How long do we sing for? How long is that? Does anybody know?
maybe 15 minutes.
15,
10,
20 minutes?
15.
How many hours are in your day that you're awake?
Yeah.
Where am I going with this?
Well, now let's see. Could be almost 20.
Right, yeah. Hey, I take a nap before work every day. Hey, I got into it. But how many hours in the day are there for us to do that we like? I think sometimes we get so focused on this moment. Why is this moment kind of being swayed to another group? Or why is this moment being taken for another side? And I think, again, as I would like to say, and I hope so, a more mature believer than some are or ought to be. In that sense, I don't have to like it, okay? There are songs we play that I'm not a huge fan of, but it's not about me.
Right.
And I think it's so important that we remember that. It's not about standing in front of the mirror and going, oh yeah, today's the day God blesses me. It's more like move the mirror away and you get to see all the people. Oh look, today's the day I get to bless people from God. So when you sing to your loudest, even during the times that you don't, I mean, whether or not you're singing well or not is another point. But when you're singing your loudest and giving praise, that may be encouraging someone else who totally doesn't know that this is why we're here. And if they can say, oh, that person's praising, and I know that they're not really appreciative of this music, but they're here to win it. They're in it to win it. Why can't I have that same attitude? Then it becomes something that's not about what we prefer and about what we like or about who's leading, because it's not about all that. And I'm not saying this against you, Ray. That's not what I'm saying.
I think you have to look at the whole too, just like you're saying, Russell. That I've been in churches that were so small that were failing on a colossal level.
Yes.
Because they were so focused on either end. Or I just love our church because I see a wonderful mix of families, of elders, of older folks, of very young folks, and there's something in our service for each of them. So even though I love the hymns the best too, like Debbie, and I really hang on to them when they do come up. But we have to really look at the whole picture.
Well, that's what, you know, it's the whole church that keeps me here. And I know that that's
Right.
just a small part of it, but for a lot of people, it's a big part. And a lot of people love it and are wonderful with it, and I mean, that's okay, but that's not the best part of it for me,
And that's
you know?
okay. But
And
something that I love is we get to do that here.
I started out in a Church of Christ that was a cappella.
Was it like the judgmental a cappella or just a cappella?
No, it was just totally a
Just a
cappella.
cappella.
And that was my first experience with Church of Christ, and very, you know, strong Christian, and that's just the way that was. So it was hard for me when we came here and came to the instrumental Church of Christ because it was so different from what I was used to.
But did music keep you here?
No. No. My family probably.
Right.
I think it's better since we've become one service too, less segregated, and we've learned to accept each other better. It has, it really has. If you haven't experienced both, you can't understand what I'm saying.
Right.
And a lot of people were against going to one, but it's so much better. I've been both, we went through COVID, we went through all this stuff. But I do see a blending better with one service.
You know what's funny? This is what's years, when we first started coming here with the 2 services years ago, when my wife and I were coming here, we first moved back, we went to the first service, the old, what would you call that? The traditional, thank you. Oh, gosh. I almost said the older one. No, the traditional one. And I really loved that. Oh man, I was totally into that. And then one Sunday my wife says, Russell, because again, she's not into that, even though she grew up with that kind of music. She doesn't prefer that. So we said, let's try the second service. And I'll tell you, I wanted to do this the whole time. To me, it was so loud. I said, I like the songs. I just can't get right. Sensory issues. And that's one of them, was just the noise was so just blasting me. But when we went to one service, it doesn't seem anywhere near. Sometimes it can seem like it's a little up there. But again, I've heard people complain about worship. Oh, worship was terrible today. And I go, worship was terrible today? Why? Because you didn't like the music and you didn't like the songs, or because your heart wasn't in the right place? You know, that's the answer.
That's the answer. Being a member of the worship team, I'm on a little hiatus right now, but anyway, I struggled with this very thing because I love the hymns. I grew up with the hymns. They hold a very special place in my heart. And when we do them, I get very excited. You know, Great is Thy Faithfulness. I'm always excited. Rachel asked me, do you get upset when I always ask you to do the hymns? No, I don't get upset. But I had to come to terms with the newer songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I started in my own brain, in my own mind, and in my heart, I would look at the words of the song. The words are very important to me. And if those words can lead somebody to the throne, then my feelings don't matter.
Right.
And I do love the new songs too. Don't get me wrong, I love them, most of them. There are a few that I won't sing. There's a hymn I won't sing too. There's quite a few of them. But, you know, if we look at the words, and if it can draw somebody to the throne, that's the important thing. It's not about, do I like this song? Is it too loud? It's about
What's so
Jesus.
funny is that people in the first group only knew people in the first group. They didn't know people in the second group.
Exactly.
And now you're forced, I mean, I used to write down names. I'd learn names. People, how do you know all the names? Because I learned them, okay? But we would go to different ones because I'd say, wow, I never saw that person before. Wow, I never saw that person before. You know, so I think it's really helped blend a lot here.
And I like that. And when you talk about names, I don't know everybody. Actually, I might just know about everybody's name. But it's funny. Like I couldn't think of Debbie's name for us forever. And then I heard someone say, "Hey, Debbie."
Before you knew me.
What's that?
You knew my daughter before you knew me.
That's right. So it's funny because I would hear Rivard, and then I get cussed. There's a first name there, and finally someone said it to you, and I went, "Pick that up." Kind of like Linda. I wrote it in my head and went, "That's that. Here's the face. Here's the picture. Put it and stick it on the wall." You know, that's how my head works. Everything's on a wall somewhere, like a little sticker.
That's where.
Let's face it, all of, well, not all everybody, but speaking for myself, being 84,
Almost 8 years.
almost 84 years old. And when I knew the old songs, the old hymns, that's what we sang, that's what we did, how long am I gonna live now? What am I gonna pass on to the kids, to the young people? But, and I think about, you said that, all right, that being born in 60, well, I was born in 41. And what music did I hear to start with, after I started hearing music, of course, was the big band sound. And I love the big band sound music. Glenn Miller, Harry James, all those, because that's what I heard, music-wise. And it came along in the 60s, and it to do with the twist, or before the 60s, in the mid-50s to late 50s, Elvis came about. Whoa. Older people didn't like this stuff, didn't like it. We had the woman that did the radio back home, and she played music, and she would not play any of those records because she didn't like it. But we're looking at our churches now. If we are not willing to open up take in, we're dying. Because we're dying. The older people are dying, and then they lose attendance, they lose all of this stuff. And we have to, be willing to open up yourself. And like Yolanda said, I do read, when they do music at my church, which is upbeat music, I look at the words that's there, and I look at the words that I'm singing, and what they mean to me, personally, what they mean to me. And I think that's what we have to do with our younger people, especially. Be willing to open up and find times that we can open up and introduce them. How would you like to hear some of our own music? Our own stuff, and just open things
Right.
up to it.
Well, in relation to that, and this is something I really want to make a point about, even though the ones who'd only been there for the shortest period received the same pay as the one who'd been there the longest,
Right.
who's the more important individuals in that whole, who has done the most work? The ones who've been there all day. And I don't think that we really recognize that, because it can be great to be there at the 11th hour and you get your pay and you get to run home, but the ones we often forget, the ones who've been there the longest are the ones who've done by far the most work. And yes, in the end, they're going to receive the same reward, they're going to get the same amount, and yet, I think it's so important that we still have to remember, we still have to bring to mind that those are the ones who form the basis of those laborers, those guys who were hired first, the ones who were hired in the 9th hour, and then less so, in the 6th and the 3rd hour, the ones who were hired in the 3rd hour, and then the 6th and the 9th, kind of less so, but that 11th hour is just so far off. We have to remember that they form the basis, and I've said this forever, the older generation forms the kind of like the foundation. If Christ is the rock, then we have something that's built upon that, and so this is things you guys have to pass on. And so the ability to say, I don't necessarily have to like something, and still being okay and saying, it's not my vineyard. And I think it's not how we worship, it's not where we worship, it's what we're worshiping for and who we're worshiping. It's not the when and the why and the way. It's exactly, we are there because He has called us to be there. And I know we're kind of relating this to music, but it's something that's very relational in sort of this environment in this generation. But I really think that can be applied to a lot of different things when we think about where we're putting our money, in the church, or where we're putting our efforts in terms of certain things. So I really appreciate that the crew here, on Wednesdays, you still had that heart, you still had that passion, and you guys have something that's kind of geared towards you. But this is just as much church as it is on Sunday morning, and I think that you guys have to kind of really understand, which I think most of you do. And I don't have to repeat that, but you get it. And so we have all that time. It's just for that. But again, everyone's working towards the same purpose. Everyone's working towards the same goal, even though they've done it for a lesser amount of time, or it's something that's newer and it's a thing that's shaping things a little bit differently. The reason stays the same. The who stays the same. The where and the hows are going to change, and the when, that's all going to change. But the who is what's important. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that there's levels in heaven?
Do I think there are levels in heaven? There are, okay. So when it comes to the understanding, okay, whenever heaven's described, first of all, let's put it in human terms. For our understanding to be what God has given us, it's not possible. People have sometimes said that, and I'm not going to throw her under the bus, she's not here. But people have said that, if heaven's a square, there are certain mansions that are on the edges, and they don't get the brightest light, or so on and so forth. I think that's a bunch of hogwash.
Oh, yeah. I don't think that either.
Because right.
I'm just happy to get in, but I just wonder.
Right. Right. Well, I've always thought of it like this. If you think of the planet, right, and everybody's on the outside, what if everybody were on the inside of the planet at the same level, and Christ is in the center, and God's in the center of it? So again, we're thinking three-dimensional, fleshly, and not kind of godlike. But I don't.
Do you think that's the same as hell? Because sometimes I think people need to be in the deepest, darkest hell that there is.
There is, again, there's a place where the dead go, okay, after they perished. The Greeks called it Hades. In the Old Testament it was Sheol. We would call it hell. That's not the burning fire. That's not where the worm doesn't die. That's not that place. That's the lake of fire. And yes, when people are judged after they've been brought before God, guess what? That's where they go. No levels. It's one. One punishment, one eternal life.
One size fits all.
One size fits all. Yeah, you either get one or the other, and it's all God's call. So I don't believe in levels. Yeah. Joe.
Let me help Beulah out here.
Thank you. I mean, not that I don't have my own opinion, I
No,
just,
Yeah.
But there is a scripture that might address what you're talking about.
okay.
1 Corinthians 2:9, the eye has not seen, nor has the ear heard, nor is, or there's one more part of it, what God has prepared for us in heaven. So we don't know,
Right.
but we will find out when we get there.
Yeah, again, everything is told us in relational terms.
For nor has entered the hearts of men, right?
Right.
What God has prepared.
Even when we
we
look
don't
at this, he uses parables that relate to us. Money, the denarius, we would say about $100. People who work for an hour go $100. That's pretty good for an hour. And people who work for 12 go $100 for 12 hours. Well, you're cheaping me. But again, this is all relational. It's just like that. So when we think of these things that are in Scripture, it's God taking his perfection and his beauty and his immortality and his eternalness and his incomprehensible knowledge and understanding and wisdom and putting into our simple little pea brain terms. It can really get us. This is why theologians for centuries and millennia have written books and tomes that fill libraries and churches of understandings of things. When it comes down to it, again, like Joe said, you're not going to understand it until you get there.
And there's a scripture talking about you've heard that one where if one sheep got out of the fold, went way out there, they stop everything they're doing to go out there and save that one sheep.
Just like
Now,
the prodigals, yeah.
1 Timothy 2:4 says, God will have all men to be saved and come under the knowledge of the truth. That's whether you start work today or accept Christ today or 100 years from now before you go. If you accept Christ, that's what he's waiting for. So it doesn't matter. He'll have all men to be saved. Not necessarily that, you gotta accept Christ. You're not gonna go to heaven because all men to be saved, that's it. No, don't work like that. Yeah. But I mean, that scripture kind of addresses that one there.
Yeah.
And then one other question I have.
Sure.
With that one verse in the Bible that says, this generation shall not pass away until you see me coming back. That was written in the New Testament.
Yes.
Yeah.
We went over that
and a lot of people thought, well, that's this generation. But nobody knows when that generation is, when it's going to be. But they took it back then as it's going to be this generation.
Again, the word generation there doesn't mean age. It's more like the word is more race. He's not specifically speaking to people who are of that age. He's speaking to the specific, listen, you people who are hearing me, your sons and daughters and so on, they're going to live, and when Christ comes in his kingdom, you're going to know it when he comes in the end. And at the same time, when he comes in his kingdom, he's also coming when he is resurrected from the dead. So there's two different of those coming in his kingdoms. There's the one where he's resurrected, and then there's the final coming where he comes and ultimately to rule forever. So again, people have used that word, and I think they've taken that word generation to be like, oh, those people are going to be immortal. That's not what it's referring to. No. But good discussion this morning. Anyone have anything else?
A lot of people who have passed on, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
people that we know them to have been us, know them to have been good people, Christian people, they've served, they've done so much. Your grandma, your grandpa, your spouse, whatever. But I became a follower of Christ stuff for me? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Because, you know, we're gonna still all work together and worship God constantly. That's what it's all about, but you know, I can't hold it against because they've been out there first, you know, and I was last.
Right, and that even includes the generations of people who
Yeah.
millennia ago
You're-
served first, and then
Exactly.
here we are in the latter days doing things so differently.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that gonna keep me if I sing these upbeat praise songs? Is that gonna keep me from getting,
Hey, we could go back to Gregorian chants from Psalms.
yeah, that's.
We could do that. I had, real quick, I had a buddy preacher who, when he was in the second time he was preaching at a church, they kind of went to him and said, "You're the preacher, we've hired you, we have this problem. These people want this hymnal, this new one, and yet we've had this one forever. You make the decision." And he sat there for a while, a couple days, a couple weeks, and ultimately when they came back and they had another meeting, and they said, "Okay, we'd like to hear what you had to say on the two." He says, "Okay, listen, if you guys can't agree on what hymnal we're going to sing, we're going to take it right back. We're going to pull the Psalms, and we're just going to sing the Psalms." People said, "That seems absurd." He said, "Why? They've been singing the Psalms for 3 millennia. Why would we not do that? Why would we not go back to the original words?" They thought that seemed preposterous. And he said, "Well, it's just as preposterous for us in our new age to go back to the hymns, or go back to the Psalms, as you guys were saying. It's just as preposterous that you're fighting over what hymn we'll sing." You know? So again, you can always take that, take what I say with a grain of salt, but always go back to Scripture when it comes to those things. But thank you this morning.
I always say in music, as far as Christian gospel, you know, 100 years from now, you won't be hearing Rock of Ages. I'm telling you. And you don't
It's
know
all
what
good.
it's gonna be.
It's all
like.
there in Revelation,
It's
over
gonna
and
be
over and over.
totally different.
That's right, that's right. Heard that one.